Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, December 18th, 2025. White House and Democratic lawmakers weigh in on President Donald Trump's Wednesday night primetime TV year-end address, during which the president highlighted what he sees as his achievements after almost a year in office. Democrats make a last-ditch effort to get a vote to extend expiring Affordable Care Act health insurance premium subsidies. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announces new rules that aim to prohibit gender-affirming care for transgender youth. President Donald Trump signs an executive order to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug, to ease restrictions and allow for more research. We'll talk about it with Axios reporter Herb Scribner. White House says the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts has been renamed by the Board of Trustees the Trump Kennedy Center, but there are questions about whether that would take an act of Congress. House votes to require the gray wolf be removed from the Endangered Species Act list. And Pope Leo XIV names a new Catholic Archbishop of New York, who is, like the Pope, from Chicago. Washington Post this morning writing that President Donald Trump bashed his predecessor and praised his own policy achievements in his first year back in office, delivering an 18-minute live address to the nation on Wednesday as he seeks to reverse lagging public opinion numbers and convince Americans that he is addressing their economic concerns. Flanked by Christmas trees and greenery in the White House's diplomatic reception room, the president read much of his speech at an unusually rapid pace, quickly jumping from one topic to the next. He weaved a mixture of criticism of former President Joe Biden, who left office in January, with praise for his policies on immigration, inflation, and social issues, and a suggestion that Americans will feel the benefits of his policies come tax season. That was from the Washington Post. Kevin Hassett, director of the White House National Economic Council, spoke to reporters in the White House driveway about the president's message on the economy.
During that address, he actually blamed a lot of what Americans are seeing in the economy on the former administration, on former President Biden. At what point is the Trump administration responsible for the economy?
As an economist, what I would do is I would blame bad policies of the past and try to not make it so personal. But I guess if you're a politician, you have to talk about the person you've competed against. The bottom line is there are really terrible policies that drove inflation very, very high. And they were very easy to understand. If you go back and look, I was criticizing the policies right when they were happening, called for 7% inflation before anyone knew inflation was taking off, just because the simple intuition that if you send a lot of money to people in the U.S., but you attack supply with heavier regulation, heavier taxation, then supply goes down, demand goes up, you get inflation. And so what President Trump understands is that sort of Keynesian view that the only thing that matters for the economy is demand, that doesn't work. And that what we need to do is we need to increase supply if we want to have high growth and low inflation. He did it before. We had 3% growth and 1% inflation while he was here before, and he's going to do it again. But I'm not talking about inflation until after 9 o'clock.
So would it be fair to say that come 2026, it's Trump's economy?
Oh, when does it become Trump's economy? Or let me explain like a way to think about it. So for the typical American buying a new home, the annual cost of a new mortgage went up by $14,000 because of inflation plus the higher interest rates, and we've got data on that. In fact, I think we even showed it last night in the chart that some people saw, some people didn't. And so because we've reduced the deficit quite a bit and interest rates have come down, then that $14,000 hole that was dug by the policies of the previous administration is now about $12,000. So we've made up ground of about $2,000 a year by lowering mortgage payments with the policies we've already done. And so, we're making progress, the American people are making progress, but in some places the hole that's been dug is a really deep hole and it's going to take a while to get out. People lost purchasing power of about $3,000 under Biden. They've gained purchasing power of about $1,200 so far under us, but that's still a negative number if you include the Biden number, right? And so at what point does it become the Trump economy? Well, it's a Trump economy now. Our policies are changing people's lives, but when are we going to be able to point to numbers and say that we fixed the problem, we filled the hole that Biden dug? That'll depend on what things. So for example, we're way past success on eggs, but there are other things that are going to take longer.
Kevin Hassett directs the White House National Economic Council news conference in the White House driveway. On Capitol Hill, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke about President Trump's Wednesday night speech.
Mr. President, last night, Donald Trump gave a speech about how supposedly great his first year has been. So, of course, his speech was short, because there's really not much to say about how great Trump has been. For 18 minutes, the president last night tried to convince Americans the sky is green, that trees can walk. He yelled at the camera and said that things are somehow going great, even though costs are up. He said he's doing a great job in office, all of which is obviously false. And the American people didn't buy it. It was clear watching the speech that the president didn't want to be there. The only thing Americans saw last night was a very rich president trapped in a bubble, forced by his advisors to give a speech he didn't want to give. It's like your cousin who can't sit still for a Christmas photo. Only this is the President of the United States. Our country is in a lot of trouble right now, but instead of giving Americans a plan on how we'll lower their costs, Donald Trump played the blame game. That's so typical of him. Instead of solving a problem, which is what a good president is supposed to do, he just points the fingers at other people. And that doesn't do a bit of good to get the American people back on the right track. It's never a good sign when the president begins a speech by saying, "I inherited a mess," because that's just another way of telling people, I don't want to be responsible for any of this. Again, President Trump's speech showed he lives in a bubble, a billionaire bubble, completely disconnected from reality that everyday Americans are seeing and feeling. People are feeling squeezed harder and harder every day, and Donald Trump last night took a victory lap. Now let's talk about one of the most important issues for Americans when it comes to cost, health care. Last night, Donald Trump offered exactly 0 solutions for how we're going to lower Americans' health care premiums. He kept blaming Democrats. He kept saying the health care crisis is not his fault. But here are the facts. Immutable facts, Donald Trump. No amount of finger-pointing, lying, hyping it up, patting yourself on the back is going to undo the fact that the American people are going to pay a lot more for health care come January 1st. Because on January 1st, the ACA enhanced premium tax credits are going to expire because Donald Trump chose to let them die.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. He was followed by the Senate Majority Whip, John Barrasso, Republican from Wyoming.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today having just heard the Minority Leader talk about the President's address to the nation last night. I listened carefully to what the President had to say, and I thought he did an outstanding job explaining what a difference a year makes. Because what the President inherited and Republicans inherited when we took over after Joe Biden and the Democrats had been in charge, our country was weaker. Our country was poorer. Our country was less safe. And what we've seen is a complete reversal over the last year, with a focus on significant changes at the border, where we now have a secure border. Most secure it's been in years and years and even decades. A huge difference on energy, where right now, going into the Christmas season, gasoline prices are at the lowest they've been in 5 years. Complete change in taxes, where the Democrats wanted to raise taxes on American families by $5 trillion. Instead, this year, as we go into next year, people are going to see a dramatic difference in lower taxes impacting how much money they have in their pockets. And a dramatic change in national security. We now have peace through strength, and we didn't have that over the last administration. And then on top of all these things, President Trump announced something called a warrior dividend. That's going to give $1,776 to each and every one of our brave men and women in uniform, and there are over 1 million of them right now. And what a gift and what a bonus to thank them for their service. Oh yes, we are dramatically changing the direction of this country. We're getting America back on track. And Mr. President, just this morning we got additional good news. It's the latest inflation report. The inflation has slowed in November to 2.7%, and that is lower than anything anyone expected. That's a reflection of the work that we're doing. Core inflation was the lowest since March of 2021. That's when Joe Biden and the Democrats came into office. And we faced 40-year high inflation. That's what the American people suffered through under 4 years of Biden and the Democrats. This is good news for consumers. It's good news for Main Street. It's good news for the country. The evidence is undeniable. Republicans are getting America back on track.
Senator John Barrasso, Republican from Wyoming, the majority whip on the Senate floor. He mentioned the inflation report. Associated Press writing, at a time when Americans are frustrated and angry over the high cost of living, the government released a report Thursday showing that inflation had cooled unexpectedly in November. But economists quickly warned last month's numbers were suspect because they'd been delayed and likely distorted by the 43-day federal shutdown, and most Americans have not felt any let-up in the high prices they are paying for food, insurance, utilities, and other basic necessities. The Labor Department reported Thursday that its consumer price index rose 2.7% in November from a year earlier. That was from AP. Senator Barrasso also mentioned the payment to members of the military as announced by President Trump on Wednesday night, a bonus. Federal News Network writing about this. President Trump's warrior dividend bonus for service members, which he suggested would be funded by tariff revenue, is actually a one-time basic allowance for housing stipend already approved by Congress, according to a senior administration official. Congress appropriated $2.9 billion to supplement the basic allowance for housing, and the Pentagon will disperse $2.6 billion of that funding as a one-time payment to roughly 1.28 million active duty service members and 174,000 reserve component members. Again, that was from Federal News Network. Senator Schumer, earlier in this program, spoke about expiring Obamacare enhanced premium subsidies. About 22 million Americans who get health insurance through the Affordable Care Act are now looking at increased costs at the end of this month. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a rally today with other House Democrats on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol building, called for an immediate vote to extend those tax credits.
Because of the leadership of House Democrats, of this House Democratic Caucus, we've successfully secured a vote with a successful discharge petition to protect the health care of the American people and extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. We're here gathered on the House steps with one last thing remaining. We want to make clear to Mike Johnson that the American people deserve a vote on the Affordable Care Act tax credit legislation and deserve that vote today. No more excuses, no more delay, no more burying your head in the sand. Under no circumstances should the House of Representatives adjourn until we successfully extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for tens of millions of Americans. The American people deserve a vote today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, today.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a rally with other House Democrats on the steps of the U.S. Capitol building. And House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, was asked at a news conference Wednesday night about the timing of bringing up the bill that has now gotten the required 218 member signatures on a discharge petition. All the Democratic members plus 4 House Republicans, a bill that would extend those expiring tax credits of the Affordable Care Act. The Speaker said he will bring it up when the waiting period for the discharge petition runs out. And now that the House has adjourned today for the Christmas and New Year's holidays, that will not be until January. President Donald Trump was asked about all of this today in the White House Oval Office. You'll also hear from Dr. Mehmet Oz, administrator of CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Yes. A health-related question on your health care plan. You've said you want to make direct payments to Americans, but these Obamacare subsidies are expiring now in a matter of just a few days. More than 20 million Americans are now bracing for their premiums to skyrocket. Are you going to let this happen, or will you intervene?
Yeah, they will skyrocket because it was never any good. I'd like to see the money that is going to the insurance companies by the hundreds of billions of dollars. You know, their stocks are up 1,400%, 1,800%, and 1,624%. Their stocks are up through the roof over a fairly short period of time because they're getting vast amounts of money. I want that money to go to the people directly and let the people buy their own health care. And they'll get much better health care than they get with the Unaffordable Care Act, as it's known by a lot of people. It is virtually unaffordable for people. It's a bad thing. We can have a great thing. Let the money go directly to the people and let them buy their own health care.
But this is an urgent problem, Mr. President. Is there anything you can do now, Mr. President?
Can I answer, Mr. President?
This is going to be right now, as far as I'm concerned. Go ahead.
We just got data today. We have federal exchanges where people come shopping for the ACA. And the President hasn't heard this yet, but we've talked to the team. The percentage change from last year was down 2.7 to 2.8%. Not the massive numbers that have been predicted. And there's many possible reasons for this, but right now Americans are signing up for these programs despite all the things that have been going on. 2.8% is a tiny fraction of what many had claimed would happen, and I think it speaks to the fact the American people appreciate these ACA plans are already subsidized over 80%. So it's a good deal, even if you don't get the extra 15-20%.
It's a great solution to much better health care at a much lower cost. Yeah, please.
But do you want Congress to extend these ACA subsidies?
Well, I'd like not to be able to do it. I'd like to get right into this and not ask Oz this question in particular, but I'd like to see us get right into this. I don't know why we have to extend. This could be done rapidly if the Democrats would come along. We have a problem. The insurance companies own the Democrat Party. They own it. And the Democrats having a hard time. They give a lot of money to the Democrats. Very little money to Republicans, by the way. A lot of money to Democrats. And they're going to have to decide, do they want to do the right thing or do they want to be beholden to the insurance companies? They're making a fortune. I want the money to go to the people. Go ahead, Oz. How would you say that?
I agree with the President. We have some ideas out there. Congress is working through some concepts. But I just want to emphasize that the ACAs are not imploding based on the data we just received from the federal marketplace.
This can go very quickly, actually.
President Donald Trump and CMS Administrator Dr. Mehmet Oz at a news conference in the White House Oval Office. This is Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio. New York Times writes the federal government on Thursday acted to put an end to gender-related care for minors across the nation, threatening to pull federal funding from any hospital that offered such treatment. The move reflects the laser-like focus on the issue by President Trump, who in his first days in office called gender treatments for minors a stain on our nation's history. The administration's action is not just a regulatory shift, but the latest signal that the federal government does not recognize even the existence of people whose gender identity does not align with their sex at birth. That was from the article at the New York Times. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. spoke at the announcement at the department's building in Washington.
So-called gender-affirming care has inflicted lasting physical and psychological damage on vulnerable young people. This is not medicine, it is malpractice. We're done with junk science driven by ideological pursuits, not the well-being of children. A peer-reviewed report published by the HHS Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health last month confirms that sex-rejecting procedures impose medical dangers and lasting harm on children who receive these interventions. So today we are taking 6 decisive actions guided by gold standard science and the week 1 executive order from President Trump to protect children from chemical and surgical mutilation. This morning I signed a declaration. Sex-rejecting procedures are neither safe nor effective treatment for children with gender dysphoria. These procedures fail to meet professionally recognized standards of care. Medical professionals or entities providing sex-rejecting procedures to children are out of compliance with these standards of health care. This declaration is a clear directive to providers to follow the science and the overwhelming body of evidence that these procedures hurt, not help, children. Additionally, CMS is proposing 2 new rules. The first rule will bar hospitals that participate in Medicare and Medicaid, which is almost every hospital, from performing these dangerous and harmful procedures. The second rule prohibits the federal Medicaid dollars from funding the sex-rejecting procedures on minors. The FDA is issuing warning letters to 12 manufacturers of breast binders, which are medical devices used for purposes such as assistance in recovery from cancer-related mastectomies. The FDA is telling these companies that the illegal marketing of breast binders to children for the purpose of treating gender dysphoria commits significant regulatory violations and requires swift congressional or corrective action. If the manufacturers don't comply, they could face enforcement actions, including product seizures. Furthermore, HHS is also moving to reverse the Biden administration's attempt to include gender dysphoria within the definition of disability.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at today's announcement in Washington, joined by the leaders of the FDA, CDC, NIH, and CMS. The ACLU putting out a statement saying it will challenge the new rules in court, writing the administration's proposal seeks to prohibit the provision of evidence-based medically necessary care for transgender people under 18. Care that is supported by every major medical association in the United States, including the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics. We have seen the devastating consequences of similar policies at the state level, and we have fought them every step of the way. We will not rest until the rights of transgender youth to live authentically and access the care they need are fully protected. That statement from the American Civil Liberties Union. The U.S. House today passed a bill that would prohibit Medicaid payments for gender-related treatments for minors. This follows yesterday's passage in the House of a bill to punish up to 10 years in federal prison doctors who provide gender transition treatments for minors. Congressman Mark Takano, Democrat of California, chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus, spoke on the House floor today against the bill up today. It is titled by its Republican sponsor, the Do No Harm in Medicaid Act.
I rise in opposition to this hateful legislation. The so-called Do No Harm in Medicaid Act prohibits Medicaid from spending funds on medically necessary care, like puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormone treatments for transgender individuals under 18. This is Congress seeking to ban health care for the most vulnerable among us. Republicans are working to ban parents from providing their trans children on Medicaid with necessary health care. These types of decisions should be made between families and their physicians. Yet, here we are, having politicians in Washington, D.C. telling parents across America that they know how to raise their trans youth. Transgender people need consistent access to essential and medically necessary care like everyone else. And this care makes possible for transgender people to live safely and authentically as themselves. I've spoken with countless families about the impact of this life-saving care and what it has done for their children. I have also spoken with doctors that have provided this safe and effective care. The health care that trans youth receive is a decision that they should be able to make in consultation with their parents, therapists, doctors, not by politicians. Medical care for transgender youth is safe and effective and is supported by every major medical association representing more than 1.3 million U.S. doctors. The hypocrisy of this legislation is staggering. The bill bans Medicaid from covering medical care for transgender youth, but allows for the same exact care for non-transgender youth. The proof is here in black and white. Republicans are seeking specifically to target transgender youth, and trans people are less than 1% of the population. Republicans are targeting the wrong 1%. This is not the 1% that is trying to take away the health care of all Americans. So I call on the Speaker to bring the Affordable Care Act tax credits to the floor now, today, and save health care for 22 million Americans.
Congressman Mark Takano, Democrat of California, chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus, which was founded in 2008, originally the Congressional LGBTQ+ Caucus. And the House did pass this bill by a vote of 215 to 201 for Democrats, joining all Republicans in voting yes. USA Today writes President Donald Trump signed an executive order to federally classify marijuana as a less dangerous substance, the biggest change for the drug since 1970. And an opportunity for the industry to operate more easily. Trump directed the government to stop classifying marijuana as a Schedule I drug, which includes the most dangerous substances such as heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. Drug Enforcement Administration describes Schedule I substances as having no medical use and a high potential for abuse. Instead, Trump ordered that marijuana be classified as a Schedule III drug, which the DEA describes as having a moderate to low potential for physical and psychological dependence. That was from the USA Today article. Here's the president signing the order in the White House Oval Office.
Today I'm pleased to announce that I will be signing an executive order to reschedule marijuana from a Schedule I to a Schedule III controlled substance with legitimate medical uses. We have people begging for me to do this, people that are in great pain. For decades, this action has been requested by American patients suffering from extreme pain, incurable diseases, aggressive cancers, seizure disorders, neurological problems, and more, including numerous veterans with service-related injuries and older Americans who live with chronic medical problems that severely degrade their quality of life. And it's so really, I mean, I can't tell you, I think I probably have received more phone calls on this, on doing what we're doing. I don't think I received any calls on the other side of it, but hopefully this reclassification, which by the way polls at 82%, will help many of those patients live a far better life.
President Trump in the White House Oval Office, he also said he wants to make it clear that the reclassification is not legalization or an endorsement to use marijuana recreationally.
I want to emphasize that the order I am about to sign is not the legalization, or it doesn't legalize marijuana in any way, shape, or form, and in no way sanctions its use as a recreational drug. It has nothing to do with that. Just as the prescription painkillers may have legitimate uses, but can also do irreversible damage and never, if you look at some of the damage that can be caused, wreck lives, and if it's abused, it's never safe to use powerful controlled substances in recreational manners, and especially in this case, if you take a look, illegal and unregulated drugs, very, very bad thing. So I've always told my children, don't take drugs, no drinking, no smoking, and just stay away from drugs. I have been, they would look at me and they said, Dad, would you stop saying that? I would say every time I looked at it practically. Young Americans are especially at risk, so unless a drug is recommended by a doctor for medical reasons, just don't do it. At the same time, the facts compel the federal government to recognize that marijuana can be legitimate in terms of medical applications when carefully administered. In some cases, this may include the use as a substitute for addictive and potentially lethal opioid painkillers, and they cause tremendous problems. This can do it in a much lesser way, can make people feel much better that are living through tremendous pain and problems. 40 states and multiple U.S. territories have already recognized the use of medical marijuana. This reclassification order will make it far easier to conduct marijuana-related medical research, allowing us to study benefits, potential dangers, and future treatments. It's going to have a tremendously positive impact, I believe. We're also asking Congress to reconsider its classification of hemp-derived CBD to ensure seniors can access CBD products they have found beneficial for pain and other reasons. Some people are literally dying, and they're dying with tremendous pain, and this can, in many cases, literally stop it. And they have their senses about them, as opposed to painkillers, which don't allow that. Don't allow them to die with dignity, frankly.
A headline at Axios.com, Trump unveils his marijuana plan. Here are the next steps to make it a reality. And joining us now is Herb Scribner, Axios breaking news reporter who wrote the article. Thanks so much for being with us. So what happens next?
Yeah, so President Trump, he issued his executive order today to reclassify marijuana into a Schedule III drug that will kickstart kind of a lengthy process that can change how people obtain marijuana for medical use, or even open the door for more cannabis research. As far as what happens next, it kind of depends on where they go from here. Typically, the Attorney General, or in this case, the Department of Justice, which gave power to the DEA, basically it kind of kicks off this process where they need to start looking into why this drug could be considered a Schedule III drug instead of a Schedule I drug, which it is now. They need to look at any potential use of why it might be, abusive, or why it may cause abuse, or any health risks to the public. And they start doing that, and that leads to the Department of Health and Human Services looking into it as well. And then the DEA then needs to schedule the rescheduling process, and then it's basically a very convoluted process where the DEA has to kind of kickstart in the motion, and then they end up publishing a notice saying we want to do this, we want to make a new rule to kind of put this in a new scheduling category, and then they invite public opinion, and the public opinion begins, and that could lead to court hearings and petitions and court filings and a bunch of stuff. And then if they get through all of that and a judge approves everything and they move through the hearings, then they get to the point where they can actually formally make the change. So that is a long way of saying, yes, Trump announced this executive order, but it's unclear if this will continue to burn.
President Trump said that he has been lobbied a lot for these changes. Which groups were most supportive of the modifications, and why? What did they say were the problems with the current classification?
Yeah, there's a number of groups that have spoken out about it, and I think the main key here is that you're putting the current scheduling process, which was even criticized by the Biden administration as well. It puts marijuana as under the same category of LSD, ecstasy, peyote. And that restricts, manufacturing, distribution, dispensing, and possession of marijuana. And as we've seen, a number of states have already made moves to either decriminalize or even legalize recreationally or medicinally. And those actions, have played out in various ways. And so there's basically a lot of, groups making this, push, because they want more research to be done on cannabis. They want, the ability to kind of see, can this be used for medical reasons? And that's related to what a lot of the states have done. And so they want to kind of see, is this something they should be doing? And like I said, this was something they considered under the Biden administration, and Trump looks to be kind of going on that path again that Biden went down.
The president also said he did not receive one call opposing the changes in the executive order, but is there any opposition, and why would they be opposed?
Yeah, there will likely be opposition. There is with as we know, there's things with a lot of things in life, and for right now there has been from what we've been seeing and some of the reporting that's been done, a lot of high profile Trump supporters even and MAGA supporters aren't completely on board with the reclassification possibility. And they've suggested that loosened restrictions could be a gateway to some larger issues. And so, that could be, either drug use or, just getting into, I think there were even criticisms about how, even the smell of marijuana being an issue for people. And so there's a couple things there where, even people who have backed President Trump for years are also kind of against this. And so, when he mentions, if no one's called him or no one's criticized it, that might not be completely true based on what we've done and seen in the reporting. But I'm not 100% sure on all that side.
We're talking with Herb Scribner from Axios. Also, an announcement about a CBD pilot program for Medicare. What is that?
Yeah, that's related to this. With the marijuana executive order. This is a green light. He greenlit a pilot program here that authorizes Medicare to cover cannabis products for seniors, and that can be a game changer. It's something that that could help older people who are seeking alternative treatments for common issues, and it would basically allow Medicare to fully cover CBD products for their patients. Again, this could be, there's something that will, it's not going to start immediately. It seems like the coverage would begin in April of next year. If, people are recommended, to receive those products from their doctor. But this comes as the Health and Human Services is expressed openness to this easing restrictions on marijuana. So it's connected to all that. It does seem like it's going to be moving along from what we've seen.
Finally, how big of a change is this executive order in the history of classification of marijuana, how it's been handled under U.S. law?
Yeah, it's a pretty significant change. I think President Biden did attempt to do the same thing, and it took almost 2 years for him to get pretty much down the road, and then he ended up taking office before his move to reschedule marijuana and change its classification was done. So this is not something that's been done often. It's a pretty big move, and it takes a lot of heavy lifting from a number of agencies and people, and so it is a pretty big move. I think the key here is to see, the announcement is one thing, but to see where it goes is another. So I think there are going to be a lot of eyes to see on when this happened, how quickly it happened. Is this just a headline, or is there actually going to be action done on this? That's kind of where we're looking to see what happens next, because there is a lengthy process. And again, this doesn't, the president said this himself, but this doesn't legalize the drug directly. It just opens the door for more research, opens the door for medicinal use, puts it in a different category. So, and again, DEA for the most part they enforce marijuana law in different ways, but they usually leave it open to the states to kind of deal with. And we've seen that for many years now with states making new laws over marijuana. So it's kind of in that middle ground where this could have far-reaching implications for research and medical use. But there's still a lot of stuff that happening in states. So we'll have to see where it goes and what happens next.
Herb Scribner, Axios breaking news reporter. Find his articles at Axios.com, and on X, he's at Herb Scribner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And a group of about 24 House Republicans sent a letter to President Trump this week urging him not to sign today's executive order, led by Pete Sessions of Texas and House Freedom Caucus Chair Andy Harris of Maryland. The letter calls marijuana a harmful drug that is worsening our nation's addiction crisis, and that reclassifying marijuana as a Schedule III drug will send the wrong message to America's children, enable drug cartels, and make our roads more dangerous. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Friday on C-SPAN's Ceasefire. At a time when finding common ground matters most in Washington, Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman and Alabama Republican Senator Katie Britt come together for a bipartisan dialogue on the top issues facing the country. They join host Dasha Burns.
Bridging the divide in American politics.
Watch Ceasefire Friday at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern and Pacific, only on C-SPAN.
And if you miss an episode, Ceasefire is always available as a podcast, wherever you find your podcasts, and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Associated Press writing that President Donald Trump's hand-picked board voted on Thursday to rename Washington's leading performing arts center as the Trump Kennedy Center, the White House said. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced the vote on social media, saying it was because of, quote, unbelievable work President Trump has done over the last year in saving the building, not only from the standpoint of its reconstruction, but also financially and its reputation. Reporting from Associated Press, and President Trump got a question about it in his White House Oval Office news conference.
She just posted on X, your press secretary, that the board members of the Kennedy Center voted unanimously to rename it the Trump Kennedy Center. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I was honored by it. The board is a very distinguished board, most distinguished people in the country. And I was surprised by it, and I was honored by it. You know, we're saving the building. We saved the building. The building was in such bad shape, both physically, financially, and every other way, and now it's very solid, very strong. We have something going on television, I guess on the 23rd December. I think it's going to get very big ratings, and the Kennedy Center is really back strongly. It's in very bad shape, very, very bad shape physically. And we were also to get Congress to put up a lot of money and other people to put up a lot of money. We had a lot of donors come in for record-setting numbers, so we saved the Kennedy Center, and I was really, this was brought up by one of the very distinguished board members, and they voted on it, and there's a lot of board members, and they voted unanimously, so I was very honored by it. Thank you.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office, former Congressman Joe Kennedy III, he was a Democrat from Massachusetts, writing on X, the Kennedy Center is a living memorial to a fallen president and named for President Kennedy by federal law. It can no sooner be renamed than can someone rename the Lincoln Memorial, no matter what anyone says. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, Democrat from Ohio, was on today's call of the Board of Trustees and posted this video.
I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. I'm sitting here in my congressional office in Washington, D.C., just ending a call with the Kennedy Center, where I serve as an ex officio member. I am bringing this to you live today because what you may hear is that there was a unanimous vote to rename the Kennedy Center the Trump Center. Be clear, I was on that call. And as I tried to push my button to voice my concern, to ask questions, and certainly not to vote in support of this, I was muted. Each time I tried to speak, I was muted. Participants were not allowed to voice their concerns who were online. Yet it was said at the end, it was a unanimous vote. Clearly, the Congress has a say in this. This center, the Kennedy Center, was created by the Congress. I think it's important for us to know that this is just another attempt to evade the law and not let the people have a say. As a strong supporter of the arts, as someone during my entire time here in Congress, I have participated in the Kennedy Center's programs, and I salute all the artists who have performed there.
Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, Democrat of Ohio, posting that video. One of the board members, Sergio Gore, also U.S. Ambassador to India, posting on X, welcome to the Trump Kennedy Center. President Trump is saving, revitalizing, and beautifying this once world-renowned institution and making it greater than ever before. No president has ever come close with their direct engagement. Together we will bring this revered center into our nation's golden age. And a post from Maria Shriver, the Kennedy Center was named after my uncle, President John F. Kennedy. It was named in his honor. He was a man who was interested in the arts, interested in culture, interested in education, language, history. He brought the arts into the White House, and he and my Aunt Jackie amplified the arts, celebrated the arts, stood up for the arts and artists. It is beyond comprehension that the sitting president has sought to rename this great memorial dedicated to President Kennedy. It is beyond wild that he would think adding his name in front of President Kennedy's name is acceptable. It is not. Next thing, perhaps he will want to rename JFK Airport, rename the Lincoln Memorial the Trump Lincoln Memorial, the Trump Jefferson Memorial, the Trump Smithsonian. The list goes on. Can we not see what is going on here? Come on, my fellow Americans, wake up. This is not dignified. This is not funny. This is way beneath the stature of the job. It is downright weird. It's obsessive in a weird way. Just when you think someone can't stoop any lower, down they go. That was the full post from Maria Shriver. The U.S. House today passed a bill that requires the Interior Department to reissue a 2020 Trump administration rule removing the gray wolf from the endangered species list. The vote was 211 to 204. 5 Democrats voted yes, 4 Republicans voted no. Other than that, it was party line. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Republican of Colorado, sponsored the bill. She titled it Pet and Livestock Protection Act. She spoke during the House floor debate before the vote.
My bill delists the gray wolf from the federal endangered species list and returns the issue of wolf management to the states and tribal wildlife agencies. This doesn't mean that wolves will not be managed. It just means that the federal government will step aside and we will have proper state management. I think we believe in federalism here in the 10th Amendment and trust our states to do the right thing. Leftists want to eliminate hunting, lock up our lands, further restrict gun rights, and pander to the interests of extreme environmentalists who don't understand our rural way of life. In 2020, in Colorado, Denver and Boulder voted to reintroduce gray wolves west of the Continental Divide. This ballot box biology has led Colorado to rush through the importation of Canadian gray wolves and has set them loose in our state despite numerous protests and questions about the legality of this dysfunctional and chaotic approach, putting predators over people. And these predators do not obey arbitrary boundaries. Sure, Colorado may say they will be introduced west of the Continental Divide, but that doesn't keep them west, and that doesn't necessarily keep them in Colorado either, as we have seen. Importing foreign predators into our state has received pushback from our tribes, energy operators, and our farmers and ranchers. ESA restrictions prohibit ranchers and pet owners from protecting their livestock and pets, as ranchers who shoot at, injure, or kill protected wolves stalking sheep or cattle face potential prosecution.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Republican from Colorado, on the House floor. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, Democrat of Michigan, opposed this bill.
After previous delisting efforts, several states moved quickly to authorize aggressive hunting and trapping seasons. And in some cases, wolf populations declined sharply within one single year. These setbacks erase decades of conservation progress and create instability rather than sound wildlife management. Gray wolves play a vital role in maintaining healthy ecosystems. As apex predators, they help regulate prey populations, they reduce overgrazing, and promote the recovery of forests and watersheds. These ecological benefits support biodiversity and contribute to healthier landscapes that benefit hunters, farmers, outdoor recreation, and rural communities alike. Some argue that delisting is necessary to address conflicts with livestock and local communities, but science tells a different story. Broad lethal control does not reliably reduce livestock losses and can actually increase conflicts by disrupting pack structure. Non-lethal tools such as range riders, flattery, improved husbandry practices, and fair compensation programs have proven to be far more effective and deserve continued investment. The Endangered Species Act is one of the most successful conservation laws in our nation's history. It sets clear, science-based standard for recovery and requires that threats be adequately addressed before protections are removed. Delisting gray wolves without enforceable, science-based state management plans undermines both the intent of the law and public trust. And this decision is about more than one species. It's about whether we let politics override science, or whether we uphold our responsibility to protect wildlife for future generations.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, Democrat of Michigan, on the House floor before the House passed this bill, 211 to 204, sending it over to the Senate. House also passed Other bills today, largely along party lines. One would streamline federal environmental reviews for infrastructure, energy, and development projects by changing the process that federal agencies must use to comply with NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. Another one to allow mining companies to conduct mining support activities such as mining waste storage on public lands that do not contain economically viable minerals. And in the Senate today, the Senate defeated a disapproval resolution to repeal a Trump administration Health and Human Services Department rule waiving public comment periods on proposed changes to HHS programs and policies. The vote was 50-50, a tie, which loses. 3 Republicans did vote yes, with all the Democrats: Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Tom Tillis of North Carolina. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 65, NASDAQ up 313, S&P up 53. And this is Washington today. Wall Street Journal reporting from Tel Aviv, Israel. President Trump's phased peace plan for Gaza is struggling to move beyond its initial stage, hitting obstacles in Hamas's refusal to disarm and Israel's unwillingness to retreat from the enclave until that happens. The 20-point peace plan that Trump touted as bringing peace to the Middle East helped end 2 years of brutal warfare and achieve the release of the remaining living Israeli hostages, as well as the bodies of all but one of the dead. The initial phase left Gaza divided in two, with Israel controlling a little over half of the enclave and Hamas the rest. That was from the Wall Street Journal. The Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, spoke today at the UN in New York City about that one hostage remains not yet returned, joined by the hostage's sister.
For more than 800 days, Israel has said one thing clearly and consistently: the war in Gaza is not over until all the hostages are home. Every last one. That is not a slogan. It is a promise. One fallen hostage remains in Hamas captivity. Ran Gvili. Ran was murdered by Hamas terrorists on October 7th while defending innocent civilians from Hamas's massacre. After he was killed, his body was abducted into Gaza. Against all odds, Israel has brought home 254 hostages. We will not accept a reality where even one is left behind. Under President Trump's peace plan, Hamas was required to return all hostages within 72 hours. They have failed to meet that obligation. We acted in good faith. We have worked with the mediators. We have shared intelligence showing that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they know exactly where Ran's body is being held. They know. The world knows. We all know. That is not about ability. It is about will. Last week, I traveled to Israel. I met with Ran's family. I saw their pain, but I also saw their strength and resilience. They are still waiting for Ran to be returned to them and given the dignity of a proper burial. They do not stand alone. Our country stands united with them.
Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, at a news conference at the UN in New York City. CBS News is writing a Kremlin envoy will travel to Florida to discuss a U.S. proposed plan to end the war in Ukraine, a U.S. official said Thursday, as European Union leaders weighed a major loan to help the Ukrainian government. Peter Arnett begins a New York Times article, an intrepid Associated Press combat correspondent who won a Pulitzer Prize for coverage of the Vietnam War and who became one of the world's best-known television reporters on the scene of wars and insurrections for 18 years with CNN, died Wednesday in Newport Beach, California. He was 91 years old. His daughter Elsa said the cause was prostate cancer. That was from the New York Times. C-SPAN covered Peter Arnett in 2016 for our American History TV panel about the Vietnam War at the Lyndon Baines Johnson Presidential Library and Museum in Austin, Texas. And he talked about what it was like dealing with the governments of U.S. presidents while covering that war.
I think it's clear from the panel discussions of this conference so far that important policies of President Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon involving Vietnam were carefully concealed from the American public. To maintain what I call a deception The media policies of all three presidents attempted heavy-handed news manipulation and intimidation of reporters in the field and their superiors back home. The objective was to proceed with actions in Vietnam that, if publicly debated, would meet resistance at home and concern abroad. Now, our leaders endeavored to compel a powerful news industry with its long tradition of bold war reporting to bend to the whims of policymakers making questionable judgments on issues important to the American public, judgments often made far from the battlefields. In earlier significant American wars, the government, with official censorship, took upon itself the burden of deciding what news was fit to print, what information gathered by reporters in the field might harm the security of military operations, or what might not, to keep on message in terms of achieving the overall objectives and keeping the support of the public at large. But not for the war in Vietnam, an enterprise deemed too sensitive politically let me say that again. The war in Vietnam, an enterprise deemed too sensitive to justify censorship. So from the beginning, as early as June 1962, when I arrived in Saigon, assigned to the AP Bureau, there were the beginnings of the credibility gap plaguing media and military relations that only worsened as the years went by.
Peter Arnett, former AP correspondent, 1962 through 75, later with CNN, speaking at a Vietnam War summit at the LBJ Presidential Library and Museum in Austin, Texas in 2016 on C-SPAN's American History TV. He has died at the age of 91. Sitting beside him on that panel, another former war correspondent, CBS's Dan Rather. Peter Arnett appeared on C-SPAN 21 times over the years, dating back to 1991, including a 1994 C-SPAN Book Notes interview for our Book TV. His book, titled Live from the Battlefield from Vietnam to Baghdad, 35 Years in the World's War Zones. You can find them all at our video library at cspan.org. The Catholic News Agency writes the newly announced leader of the Catholic Church in New York expressed heartfelt gratitude on December 18th for having been appointed to the post by Pope Leo XIV. Archbishop-elect Ronald Hicks, who will lead the Archdiocese of New York after leading the Diocese of Joliet, Illinois, said at a Thursday press conference that he accepted the Holy Father's appointment with great humility and an open heart. Hicks addressed media at St. Patrick's Cathedral alongside outgoing Cardinal Archbishop Timothy Dolan, who turned 75 earlier this year, the customary age at which a prelate submits his resignation to the Holy See. That was from the Catholic News Agency. Here is Ronald Hicks about taking on this new position.
As excited as I am to get to know the city and the Archdiocese and all who call this home, I'm also very aware that these are complex and challenging days, especially as we face issues of life, faith, justice, peace, and healing. Still, I feel the hope that so many to our shores had that came through this very harbor here in New York, including my own family. I am committed to working with the great variety and diversity of faith leaders and civic leaders to keep that hope alive and to make real the promise of the Golden Door by acting in mutual respect and working to uphold human dignity. I'm committed to learning about the issues before our church, including the funds the Archdiocese has set aside to help resolve sexual abuse claims. As a church, we can never rest in our efforts to prevent abuse, to protect children, and to care for survivors. While this work is challenging, it's difficult, it's painful, I hope it will continue to help in the areas of accountability, transparency, and healing. I very much look forward to working closely and collaboratively with the priests, the deacons, the religious, the lay leaders of this archdiocese. And I look forward to getting to know you and them, and you and them getting to know me. Together, I hope that we can listen, discern, pray, and serve faithfully as we move forward in hope.
Archbishop-elect Ronald Hicks at a news conference at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. Standing beside him, the outgoing Cardinal Archbishop Timothy Dolan. Hicks also joked that he is and will remain a Chicago Cubs fan, but he will now root for New York sports teams as well. And he does like Chicago-style deep dish pizza, but he's learning to really like New York style. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Before we go, reminder, you can now get C-SPAN if you subscribe or plan to subscribe to Hulu Plus Live TV. All subscribers have access to C-SPAN, C-SPAN 2, and C-SPAN 3. Find out more at hulu.com/live-TV. And also, Friday, we have another C-SPAN Ceasefire debut at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. And this week, host Dasha Burns, joined by Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman and Alabama Republican Senator Katie Britt for a bipartisan dialogue on the top issues facing the country, including jobs in the economy, the future of the expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies, and rising tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela. That's Friday, 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern, Ceasefire on C-SPAN. Have a good night.